It's time to dive beneath the surface and into the minds and hearts of your favorite celebrities and pop culture icons. Welcome to Up and Adam.
Hi, guys. Welcome back. And look who I have here with me. Hi, Emily. How are you?
How are you?
Good. I'm so excited about this. I know that we just had
too.
a brief 10 seconds right before this, and I was telling you how excited I am. But now I feel like it's only appropriate since we have everybody from your side in here and my side, and we're coming together to not talk about the legal jargon for once, but to talk about some housewives.
Yep. I love it. I love it so much. I love talking housewives. I love commentary. I stick to legal commentary on my channel, but I will run commentary on just about anything I know about. And I watch Housewives. I've always watched Housewives. Sometimes I'm like, ooh, am I part of the problem with watching Housewives? I'm like, no, they know what they're in for. Let's just talk about it.
Exactly. Okay, so there's been 11 seasons. We're on our 11th season now. How many seasons of Jersey would you say that you've watched?
All.
Yeah, see, I have the same problem. And I don't want to call it a problem because we're here to talk about it. But yes, I'm totally invested in these women. I've seen them kind of grow, evolve. I mean, we all have kind of go through their highs and lows, especially Teresa.
We've seen their faces change. We've seen their kids grow up. We've seen their boobs change. This group of housewives, I don't know. This might be a good topic for discussion. Which group of housewives have had the most work done over the seasons and changed the most? I don't know if we can get to that today, but we've watched their kids grow up. I mean, when we talk about Jersey, it's 11 years. We met the Giudice girls, particularly when they were little kids, and they, like in the case of Gia, is an adult now. And we've seen the same thing on other franchises. When you have those few key housewives that have been there for just about every season, we watch their families grow up. We've watched a lot of divorces. We've watched marriages. Like it's a lot. There's been a lot.
And it's actually, you pointed out something that I haven't even really thought about, but Adriana, I believe, was born on The Real Housewives of New Jersey.
Yes, she was.
Season 2, right?
I think so. Gosh, they all blend together. But yeah, she was, because I remember the giant like bow on her head and all the photos and the christening. Who's going to forget the christening? Like, we're going to have to talk about that today, because I feel like as we walk through the episode, I don't know if you want to go in order. I will try not to jump around as we walk through the episode, but that christening was one of those first moments where we really saw Teresa and her brother go at it. And that was one of the first physical fight with the guys that I remember on Jersey. That christening kind of tipped off, and I'm getting vibes of getting back to that time in the previews for the season.
Yeah, and that's how we met Joe Gorga. That's how we met him, was with that kickoff. And going back, and we can address this later a little bit, but Melissa Gorga was trying to get in contact with Danielle Staub for years to get onto the show. And then finally, when she got onto the show, I heard that her casting tape was not the nicest when it came to her sister-in-law. I think that was part of the reason they put her on the show, because she was a challenge, and she
was selling the drama. She was ready to fight with Teresa. She's like, put me on. I'm ready.
And she triggers Teresa, which is, we're always waiting for a moment that we can get from her, which actually kind of leads us into the conversation for what happened in this episode, because that's how we
low-key segued like professionals.
Yeah, I love a good moment from Teresa, but not at the detriment of her children. Even though I said last time, Gia is an adult now, so she's not technically a child. She's not a minor. But one thing that I think kind of made Teresa's reaction as big as it was is Teresa chose to be on this show. But because she's been on the show, everything that her family has gone through has been amplified. And her daughters, I mean, we see Gia talk in this episode, and she's so mature. She's been through so much. So I think that knowing how much she's been through with her father being deported and all of that, this is a lot. And she hears about it at school. She hears about it when, they're not filming. It's constantly a part of her life. Teresa knows what the ramifications will be from Jackie's analogy.
Right. And look, I feel like just getting into this whole episode, that my husband watched with me last night. He doesn't watch a ton of Housewives. So he's like, who is that? Who is that? We'll have to talk about Frank Catania soon. I love him. I want to talk about him more. But Gia was the adult in the room that this episode needed. She was so grounded and down to earth. And she basically said in that phone call with her mom, you're being a dick. Like, You need to apologize. What you did is fucked up. Like, I know she said that, but even Gia was like, she said that because you said this. Like, you can't do that and expect her. Gia didn't seem mad at all. I mean, I'm sure she's frustrated, but Gia was like, Mom, this is what it is. Like, stop it. And Gia was and is kind of the pillar of that family and has been. And that, like, as a mom, it's hard for me to watch that because I'm like, this girl has had to grow up in the spotlight quickly, but also watching how grounded she is with that is like, you know what? Hopefully she has the support that she needs. So she comes through this being like, yeah, I stood up for my family when I needed to. I'm strong for my family and I'm a stronger woman because of it versus I didn't get to have a childhood. So I hope that Gia feels strong in this, not like I have to do this. And she seems to really take that role of being protective of her mother and wanting to be there for her family, but also calling her mom out with love when her mom's wrong. She's like, Mom, no. But I feel like Teresa came into this season and was like, this is my storyline, bitches. Fuck you, Jackie.
Yeah, no, honestly, the way that she came in and now it's sparking so many conversations and new headlines where people are like Teresa Giudice, which I call her Teresa Giudice. I know on the reunions, Andy always calls her Teresa Giudice. What do you call
Well,
it?
it shifted in the middle somewhere that it went from Giudice to Giudice. I call her Teresa Giudice. I have heard her family say it both ways. So whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's both.
No, I think, oh my gosh, I totally lost my train of thought for a second, but
me always. Teresa's grabbing headlines this season. She is going to be the featured housewife. She is fighting for her storyline. And I feel like she's trying to take control of this season because last season, I don't think she liked how everything played out. You saw her have her own like bravo, bravo, bravo moment at the end of last season where she's like, cut this. I want to talk to production. Like, now we're getting into, 5 seasons ago, you didn't see this on any of the shows, like, get production in here. Production is now a character in this show. Production is savage in the editing. Production comes in as like, you're on a reality show. Like, stop crying to me. Production has become part of the shows now because you're seeing this like fourth wall break that was always kind of fake. It's no longer a following these women around. It is now this is a produced show. These are my storylines and I'm taking the reins and I'm taking you on a journey.
Which I feel like was reality television's way of kind of evolving because they had to mix it up and give us something more to look into because we all know as viewers and super fans of all of these different reality TV shows, after watching them for so long, you start to get a hint as to how this works. So when you add that kind of, like you said, breaking the fourth wall or adding production in and seeing how things are kind of operating behind the scenes, that gets us excited. And what I wanted to ask you about Teresa too, was the fact that everyone's kind of saying about her right now, she's grasping for a storyline. She'll do anything because she's seen some of our major OGs get cut. Nene's out. Vicky Gunvalson's out. Tamra Judge was technically demoted, but she's out. She's seen some of these big names who are iconic to their own franchises on Bravo be cut. And I'm wondering if what everyone's saying is right. Like, she feels like she really has to bring it or she's going to eventually age out. Like, all good things come to an end. Not saying by age, but you know what I mean.
Well, yes. I feel like Teresa, I don't know if she's worried. I feel like I get the sense that she is self-possessed enough to be like, I own Jersey and I'm here and they love it. But also last season, I feel like her storyline got moved by what the other women did. And I feel like she's not having that this year. She wants control of her destiny. She wants control of what gets out there. And she doesn't want it to be about her. She wants to be putting the heat on everyone else. And we saw how pissed she was last year with everything being focused on her. So now I think she wants the focus to be on her for what she's doing versus what's going on in her life. But it's got to be in the back of her mind. This is how she supports her family. Her cookbooks were cookbooks because she was a real housewife. Like, the things that she has gotten in her life at this point are because she's a real housewife. And I would include her prison sentence in that. I believe that happened because she was on Housewives. So everything that's kind of happened to her is because of Housewives. And what does Teresa, if she's not on Housewives, what does she do next?
No, it's true. And, there are certain figures in these different franchises, like Lisa Rinna's one of them. For Beverly Hills, she'll always tell you, like, listen, I'll do anything for a check. And I'm sorry, this is a part of our job. Denise Richards needs to talk about it. We signed up for this. And, like, there's no links that she won't go to in order to secure her spot on the show. And
we learned that with her Depends commercial, by the way, for Rinna. We learned that with her Depends commercial.
Yeah, exactly.
That she's down for it. And it was Rinna wasn't it Rinna who was asking, like, oh, are people snorting coke in the bathroom at your party to Dorit a few seasons ago?
Exactly.
Like, I think Jackie was just taking a playbook from Beverly Hills. And I'm like, no, Jackie. Beverly Hills tries to keep up with Jersey, not the other way around, because Jersey is always more explosive.
No, Jersey for sure. But by making that statement, Rinna was addressing Dorit's guest for potential. And listen, at the end of the day, were they? Who knows? I just moved back from
it's Hollywood.
Not saying you're being around it all the time, but people are just like out there, really out there, over there, right? And you know Los Angeles, obviously. So we both know that people are out there. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. But for this, she went against the family. She talked about the family, and I feel like, especially when you talk about that Italian culture too. Like, they're close. You don't disrespect family. And I'm not saying,
that's a big Jersey no-no.
Yeah, it's a big Jersey no-no. And she brought in Gia. I honestly thought, well, I'm curious if it was production who told Jackie not to pretty much sit this one out because we don't know how Teresa's going to react to you, or if it was Jackie who made the decision, because she did make the statement when she was shaving her kids' heads, this sucks that I'm back here while Teresa.
All my friends.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, it's Teresa's sister-in-law. And technically she was here a lot,
I want to know how much these women knew each other before Jackie came on the show. Like, I don't get the sense that they are local. And look, I've lived in a small community. Before we moved to Tennessee, I lived in the community where I grew up. So when my kid was in first grade, we had this like first grade event. And I was sitting there with the group his kid got grouped with. And I was with a woman who was homecoming queen when I was a sophomore, my ex-boyfriend from high school's sister, another girl that I was on pep squad with. Like, these were the moms I was sitting with because we all had first graders. So there were times when I would joke about like the Real Housewives of the South Bay, but we knew each other. Like, we all knew each other because it was a small town. And I feel like Housewives started that way. Like, this is a group of women that runs in the same circles and they're acquaintances, close acquaintances and friends. But as they've been looking for characters, like, we need the one who's going to do this and the one who's going to do that and the foil to this one. Now it's becoming character arc, where the first seasons of Jersey really did feel like these are women that all know each other and they've got a whole lot of stuff in the closet on each other. And we're just going to film their lives as they go and buy furniture and build these mansions that are now completely outdated. Like, we've been on the show long enough that the mansions all look outdated. It's wild.
Which is crazy. But no, and just to your point, with Real Housewives of New Jersey, they kind of started with that family dynamic amongst the cast, aside from
with the Manzos and the Manzos.
And that was a recipe for another successful TV show that was on Bravo, which was Vanderpump Rules. They came and they gathered this group of friends who already had these organic friendships. They had all hooked up with each other. They've known each other for so long. They party together. And they were like, okay, there's kind of a system going on here. Let's film this. As opposed
Vanderpump felt like real life Melrose Place.
Yeah. Yeah. Trust me, working in it felt like real life Melrose. But I was like, I got whiplash from like this.
It's what they tried to do on The Hills, but they didn't get there because it wasn't authentic. But with Vanderpump, it was.
Right. It was still pre-produced. However, what I do want to say about The Hills is, like, they all came out really, for the most part, except for Justin Bobby, really successful. And for VPR, I don't know if that's technically going to be the case, but
it's fair. But I think some of the cast of The Hills was a bit more grounded because I got the sense they weren't seeking it. They were riding the wave, where with Vanderpump, I think there's more intention there because we just live in a different time. I think when they filmed Before the Hills and they're like, we're just going to follow these high school kids around, it was like, who knows what this will be. And I had on my channel, my friend Scott White, who's an actor. He was in Mighty Ducks. He ran City Guys. He's a voice actor. And he was talking about being on City Guys as the reality TV wave was riding, and they were like, have fun with that, kids, like have a good few months, like these shows are adorable. And I think back in the OG days of reality TV, that's what everybody thought, like, oh, this will be funny. Like when the cast of, you would never see the cast of Jersey Shore showing up to a summer house with their clothes and trash bags now. Like it's so much more curated than that. It's like you have to show up with the luggage and you have to show up with the bag and you have to show up with like glam. Jersey Shore, OG Jersey Shore was so fucking messy because they just showed up how they were. And they're like, I don't have a suitcase, my clothes in garbage bags. I think we're going to drink for the summer and hopefully not get an STD. Like I think that's what they showed up to the show with.
Which is now, like you said, it's kind of crazy because we don't really get that anymore. And they do sometimes try. I mean, even now, Jersey Shore, if you watch it, Family Reunion looks completely different. And you can tell that it's a totally different era with reality television. But Real World, none of that. We don't really get those kind of shows anymore where they just come in and it's like, okay, we're going to put a bunch of trash boxes together. Let's see what happens. Even Paradise
There's too much
Island
awareness.
Is so pre-produced.
Yeah, and there's so much awareness of what it's going to be like. And my husband and I fucking loved Jersey Shore. Like we love the meatballs, we love GTL, we love all of it. We like cabs are here. We still yell cabs are here about stuff. Like it was a different time. But getting back to we're still in Jersey, but getting back to Jersey, I just think it was interesting that they started recapping the fight this episode and then they went to like Dolores explaining the fight to Frank, and Frank's just sitting there. Did you notice the scars on his legs when he was sitting there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had no idea that had happened off season because I don't follow so much off season what's going on. And so I was sitting there and he's sitting in shorts with the scars up his knees and I'm like, what happened to Frank Catania? Like, and then they addressed it later on. That's crazy.
Well, I was going to ask you, and I actually pulled this photo earlier because I'm just interested, along with everybody else, I guess, as to what the dynamic is or how that works with Dolores, Frank, and David. So in this episode, Frank calls out David for being a great doctor, but a mediocre boyfriend. Dolores is not getting the commitment she wants, and she's talking to her mom about how, David doesn't want to get married. All of her friends are asking her, the house is done, why are you not engaged? And he's trying to manage what she's going to do with her surgeries, her elective surgeries. He got really annoyed with her because she got a tummy tuck and she got a butt lift. And he's like, why are you doing all these elective surgeries? For her, she's like, listen, unless you give me a commitment, I don't answer to you. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm married to a doctor. So I feel like I understand David a little bit. Being married to a doctor is different because the job commitment's different, but I imagine that that's anyone who's super dedicated to their jobs. A lot of my friends that are lawyers are also married to other lawyers, and you see this dedication to job. It's different with doctors because there's this dedication to their patients, like actual health, well-being, and safety that's different from just about any other job. My sister-in-law is also a doctor, so I see it.
Successful family over there.
My sister-in-law is an orthopedic surgeon. She is absolutely brilliant. My husband is a maxillofacial prosthodontist, but I don't know. We all just spent a lot of time in school and student loans, but I get it because when my husband was running his own practice, there were definitely times where I'm like, so work comes first. And it was like, my patients come first right now. And so that was something, and we've been together over 22 years at this point. So it's definitely something we've worked through. I think that as somebody, for Dolores, who is divorced and later in life, she's ready to have fun. She's ready to vacation. She's ready to party. She's ready to look hot. I fucking love Dolores. I think she's great. I love her on the cast, but I think she's ready to have fun.
Who do you love more for her, though? Do you like Frank better for her or David?
I mean, she was talking about David just giving it to her. I'm not mad at her for getting her sex life on.
She did say that.
And she said she likes the freedom. Like David doesn't seem to be possessive. I think that might have been an issue with her and Frank. I think her life is very complete with both of them in her life, and they seem to have a very good relationship together. It's going to be whether she really wants what she has, if she really wants the freedom and wants to live together, then she needs to say, I love our relationship as it is, and I'm happy to live with you, and just let our relationship be. But she seems to want that commitment, and that's not going to be okay for her if she doesn't have that commitment. And I think David is like, well, if there is that commitment and you expect me to be at a party and I get stuck at work, are we going to be fighting over it? Because that's the one thing he is going to avoid is, hey, I'm stuck at work. You expect me to be at this event and I'm just not going to be there. And I don't want to fight with you all the time that happens. So
right.
It's an interesting dynamic. David seems like a really good guy, but he also is a doctor that seems very set in his ways that work comes first.
And he said that too. He said, work is my first love. But, you know, speaking of doctors, and this might be a personal question that you don't have to answer, but I'm sure it's burning in everybody's minds right now. Before I ask it, guys, if you haven't already, go ahead, hit that like button, show some love. But segues.
It was perfect. And I loved it.
At what point in your husband's life do you think he woke up and said, you know what, damn it, I'm going to be a prostodontist?
My husband wanted to be a dental specialist from the time he was probably in 4th or 5th grade.
Wow.
Like as a kid. It was funny because we were going through old yearbooks when we moved ages ago, like one of the times that we moved. And it was like a 6th grade yearbook. And people are like, you know, I can't wait till we're adults and you can be my dentist. Like he knew since he was a kid. And my sister-in-law also knew since she was a kid that she wanted to be a surgeon. And I think she narrowed it down to orthopedics a little bit later. But it's the type of career track that by the time you're in junior high, you kind of have to have an eye going that direction, because by the time you're in college, it's almost too late to decide that's going to be your path, because you have to do the right kind of course of study. And of course, that's not true to everybody. But for most people, you have to do the right course of study in college to get into the right med school. I mean, the run to med school really does start in about junior high, which is insane to me, by the way. I'm not advocating for that. I think it's crazy, but it really starts there. And so I think this for David, and he seems to be around the age my husband is. I think for David, doctors in their 50s are hitting like the peak of their career. Yes, it's later than other professions because other professions don't take as much schooling. So he's really hitting the peak of his career where he has worked to be known for excellence in his field. And it's really hard to then say, okay, I'm going to put something else first. And I don't think he's divorced. I think he's never been married.
Right. No, I actually don't even know if that's been addressed, if he has been married or not. But you also make a good point too. He gives her space, and it seems like there is that mentality in Jersey. Like if anybody looks at Joey Gorga's wife, they're probably going to get their face smashed in. If anybody looked at Teresa back in the day, Joe would probably also smash in their face. Like they're very
he didn't want her at the gym. Do you remember when he was in prison and she was all nervous about going to the gym and doing a bikini competition? Because she's like, I would never have been allowed to do this. I wouldn't have been allowed to have my own interests in my own life outside of the home if he was here. I wouldn't be allowed to have people looking at me. And that was a very interesting insight. That whole season was a very interesting insight into Teresa kind of feeling herself and finding herself as an independent woman. You're not putting her back in the box. I don't think everything she does is great. I mean, she's definitely going to be an asshole all season long, but she's feeling herself. And she's like, she's turned into Cartman. She's like, I do what I want. I do what I want. I do what I want.
No, she really, honestly, at this point, she knows and she feels like she's been through it. She's shared this part of her. I kind of think that some of these housewives, like Vicky Gunvalson, lashing out at that Real Housewives of Orange County season 14 reunion, and she's like, really? Like freaking out. I think they feel some sort of loyalty is owed to them by the networks because they've allowed the cameras to come in and film them when they're being arrested or film them while they're getting divorced. But also on the other side, the networks are thinking as a business, we paid you to give us that content. We don't owe you anything. We owe you what we paid you for that contract. And then after that, we decide as the network how we want to move forward with you. And sometimes I feel like these women forget that. But I feel like Teresa has that kind of mindset where she's like, at this point, I've shared everything in my life, the good, bad, and the ugly. So I deserve my spot here. And the only thing that's really kind of saving her is, like you said, she's finding herself and blossoming into sort of this new person who's still, like you said, kind of an asshole, but sort of this new person who we haven't experienced, like.
I wish we saw more of that journey. And I know we saw it with Bethany Frankel quite a lot on New York. We saw her going to therapy. We saw her trying to find herself. We saw her having breakdowns and growing and going through the really hard growing pains of like an adult, I don't want to say life crisis, but a massive adult life shift. And Teresa has gone through a massive life shift. And I wish she would let the cameras into that part of it. Not just like, oh, I do yoga now. Okay, great, Teresa. But like the hard, nitty gritty, I have gone from thinking I was going to get married to the guy I've known since high school. My parents were going to live down the street. My life was going to look like this. I was going to cook and really be a housewife, raise my kids, and my life was going to be kind of quiet, to I'm on a television show. I'm Bravo celebrity, status. I've been to prison. My ex got deported. My life has flipped upside down. And now I have to decide who I am in my late 40s as an independent adult and figure out what that looks like for me, separate of a man, separate of what I thought my life was going to be. I'd love to see that transition. Instead, she's like, I'm going to lash out at everybody and tear you motherfuckers down. I was like, damn it. The Teresa walls just went right on up. And she's like, I'm going on the offensive.
Which she probably should not do, especially now that she has her new boyfriend, Louis Urales, because he's going to be coming in and he has his own skeletons in the closet too that have already been reported on, where him and his, I think it was either ex-girlfriend or ex-fiance, they just settled a case.
I know nothing about this. Tell me all the things. Yeah,
they settled a case. If I say anything wrong, you can totally correct me. But
no, I don't know about this. The chat can correct us. Tell me.
Yeah. I feel like what they said was that Louis had a girlfriend or an ex-fiance that was living in his house, and he ended up kicking her out of nowhere, and things kind of went left, and she filed a domestic case against him, but then the case kind of went away. They ended up settling without it becoming a public thing, but it was right around the same time that he started dating Teresa Giudice. And I'm wondering if maybe Teresa was like, hey, listen, if you do want to be in a relationship, something like serious, I can't have this kind of press around, so you need to fix that now.
Yeah, mess. That would be messy.
Because you can settle privately out of court, right?
It depends on the thing. So if it's criminal, no. Generally, well, if it's criminal, there are some ways that things resolve. If it's civil, like she sued him for an eviction with the like color of also domestic stuff, it's different. So
okay. Yeah, so pretty much I know that she's going to introduce him probably not at any point in this season, but next season, if they are still together. And that's going to have some skeletons in that closet that people are going to address, of course, because this is a messy group. And like you said, it would be more rewarding, I think, for us as viewers to watch her continue to evolve, see what it looks like with Gia moving out, her as a single mom. She's moving. She just bought a new house, what that transition is like with Joe gone, as opposed to her just going through like a tornado and ripping apart people's lives for no reason. This Jackie.
Yeah, she's turned into like a drunken mean girl. I think for a lot of the people who watch Bravo, I think we've watched her life so much, seeing her actually go through a real transformation would be fantastic. I don't know if she's opened up a lot to the cameras, but she's not really been super, super vulnerable. And I don't think she is capable of sharing that part of herself, even with her family members. She's a very, very guarded person. It would just be the most fascinating thing to see, because we do a lot of times have to reinvent and recreate our lives in our late 30s and 40s, because life doesn't go the way you thought it was when you're in your 20s. And you look back and go, well, shit, we're here now. Now what? Like, now what? Now what do we do? Like, this is not, I didn't think we were on this path, and here we are. But I think she's too guarded to do that, because we saw that for years with what's going on with Joe, what's going on with the court cases, and her just stonewalling people about what was going on in her life.
No, and for Teresa too, it seems like not only does she not like to really share too much that's going on behind the scenes, but she also doesn't like to accept any responsibility. And we saw that too in this episode when, well, Melissa made a good point. Gia is really the only person who is able to get through to Teresa. But I think it's because they've been on the same journey, as opposed to everyone else who approaches Teresa with these kid gloves. And one, she's reluctant to listening to anything that they have to say. Two, she's not owning up to anything. I mean, the whole conversation and her part of the argument where she's saying, listen, you know, like, I did Jackie a favor. As a friend, I would want to know. So what? She can't handle it? It's like, well, maybe if she's getting that mad, there's something actually happening behind the scenes. If she can't handle it, she can't handle it. What should I apologize for? And Margaret's like...
And the producers cut to her screaming at Kim D.
Yeah. It's like, you... What?
Yeah, the producers cut to like, wait a second, Teresa. No, that's not what it is. Like, this is what it is. And she lost her ever-loving shit when she was in that situation. Like, Teresa was like pulling weaves off of bitches for seasons for daring to talk about her life. And now she's like, well, I mean, I didn't ask for any evidence. I didn't ask for this. I heard it. It's out there. Where there's smoke, there's fire. What, who, me? If somebody had done that to her, well, no, Kim D did do that to her. And Teresa went absolutely crazy.
She was going to rip her throat out. And
she was.
I think that talking about Gia also falls under the category of course, family. And I think this was another moment where Teresa could have potentially actually put her hands on Jackie at some point, because you were talking about her daughter. But Margaret made a good point. I actually feel bad for Jackie a little bit here, because like Margaret said, Teresa is not the injured party here. Jackie is the injured party. So the analogy wouldn't have come had Teresa not run around and spread this rumor. And she said it's almost like the chicken before the egg thing, right?
Yep. And we talked about that a little bit when we were talking about legal stuff. We talked about, you know, Jackie would have had all of the empathy in the cast had she picked a different analogy. The analogy she picked is rough, but the cast is still standing behind her going, that analogy wasn't great, but what Teresa did is fucked up. And Teresa is not backing down because this is calculated on Teresa's end. So she's not backing down because this was what she intended. She chose it. And you know what? It's the same way Jackie chose that analogy. I know that she went in there with that analogy loaded. It didn't just stumble out. She's a smart girl. She's a lawyer. And she came in with her arguments ready to go.
You said that last time. You said, as a lawyer, we always are prepared with our arguments. We know what we're going to say, and we know how we're going to go into sort of a conflict, right? You know how you're going to address it. And Teresa said the same thing that you said last time.
I was screaming at my television. I'm like, yes, she did. She had that in the back of her mind. Whether she's like, oh, I'm going to say this, I'm sure she was running the scenarios of like, well, this and 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 this. And then this is the one that came up. It's not a great analogy, but seeing Gia on the phone saying, yeah, but mom, this is what you did, like kind of steps me down a little bit. I'm like, okay, Gia gets it. Gia knows what this analogy was. And Gia was checking her mom. And Teresa was just like, yeah, but I'm not letting it go. And continued to stir it up as they drove to Lake George and was like, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong.
She said that she said literally, I'm going to slice her. She said that she would have made her B word. This made her bitch.
I've said all of the curse words, and you're not going to say bitch up in here.
No, she said, I'm going to make her my bitch. You know, she said, I would have wrote her harder than her husband would have. Like, Teresa she's hot. She's mad. And
Teresa was almost gleeful talking about getting ready to fight with Jackie and Lake George. She wasn't anxious. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't like, oh, I just don't want there to be a confrontation. She was just like, I am ready. Like, I am armed and I am ready to go to war with this woman. And I want to spend my weekend drinking and ripping into Jackie. Damn it. She was gleeful about it.
But I think what's not fair here is, I don't want to call Jackie like a weak link, but I feel like she's an easy target in the sense that like, she's not scary to argue with. You know what I mean? Like, Teresa looks at her like, I will eat you alive. Like, it's not you. Teresa has that hot temper. Joey Gorga has that hot temper where he starts getting
Joey
mad.
Gorga's temper.
Right. He starts freaking out. Like Jackie doesn't have that. She sits there and tries to use her words and have a real conversation. And she's like, why are you getting so worked up? And for Teresa, she's like, it's going to take one, just me snatching you across the table. And it's going to feel for her so gratifying because she knows I can do that to you. Like, you're not going to do anything. I will mop the floor with you because I have something you don't. And that's just those kind of street, I don't want to say street smarts, but she's been in different situations that Jackie hasn't had to endure. And who knows, maybe even in jail a time or two where she had to defend herself or be really strong. She has a different way about her. And I don't think Jackie measures up or is an equal opponent for that.
I agree with you. And I also think that Jackie is aware of her image in a way that she's not going to go to that level and doesn't want to be pushed to that level. And I think that's why part of why she's so mad. I don't know if Jackie's really mad about the allegations about her husband. I think she's mad that she's being dragged into this because she's like, I'm not here to fight that way. But Jackie also was all too happy to pick at Teresa about like, well, what about these photos? And like Jackie's happy to pick at others, but she picks away at people. Teresa will literally snatch a wig. So it's a very different style. I find women like Teresa a little easier to deal with because you know where they're coming from. Jackie's a little more like, I'm gonna be behind the scenes working at the cracks. And Jackie has gone in. I mean, it's not like she's done absolutely nothing. So I'm not surprised Teresa came gunning for Jackie this season. It's interesting. It's interesting.
Right.
It's interesting.
No, I mean, honestly, too, again, I think I said this last time when I had Kim D on, I asked Kim in our interview, what if you could change anything about the current cast, what would you change? And she said to take Teresa off of the show because nobody wants to have conflict with Teresa because they're afraid of losing their job. Nobody wants to have conflict with Melissa because they're afraid that Teresa will side with Melissa and then they'll lose their job. And it makes it kind of hard to have this authentic situation. Yeah, this dynamic doesn't really make sense, but Jackie does not care. She will go against Teresa.
Yeah, Jackie doesn't care. And I think that's what Jackie's role is. Jackie's role is to kind of call it out and to fight with people. It's interesting to see if Jackie's whole season is going to be fighting with Teresa. And I feel like that's exactly what's being set up. But then we saw and we've skipped a chunk of the show, but then we saw in the previews, Teresa going back after Melissa again. I'm like, what in the ever living fuck are you doing going back after Melissa again?
Her brother did make sense when he said Teresa never forgets. She doesn't forget things. She holds on to them. And she's had beef with Melissa. She's had beef with Jackie. And I think when she gets that little bit of ammo, which first of all, let's be clear here. Nobody handed her a loaded gun in this situation with Jackie. She manufactured this whole thing just by the way that there is no proof. She's not giving names. She seems so inconsistent with the way that she's like telling them. She's like, I don't know. And I don't know.
Nobody's come out and said, I'm the one who told her this.
Which somebody would take their 3 minutes and roll with it, you know?
Yeah, they would.
But like Joey Gorga said, my sister doesn't forget things. And Jackie, producers are shady, and they did kind of pan back to last season. And Jackie was talking about Teresa and the younger guy that she was running around Miami with. And Teresa didn't forget. So now she's like, you're going to talk about me and what I'm doing? Okay, let's talk about you. Even though it might not be something that was actually said. She's like, you want to play that game? You signed up for this show. Let's play.
Yeah. And Jackie, I think, is playing by a different rule book than Teresa. Jackie's like, well, it's fair game if it's out in the public. And Teresa's like, watch me put it in the public. Watch me put it out there. Yeah. Jackie's stuck to like, I just talk about stuff that's already out there. And Teresa's like, it's out there now, bitch.
Well, and then Teresa tried to, again, with going around in circles and having all of her excuses and not really taking responsibility. When she was being called out at the table, she said to Margaret, she's like, you said that about Jennifer and her husband had a girlfriend. And she said, yes, but then I apologized right after. And she's like, okay, well, Jackie said that about me when everyone thought I was talking to a 20-something-year-old. And she's like,
there were photos.
There were photos. And Margaret kept on saying, you're trying to dance around this and trying to not really accept responsibility. But at this point, like your daughter said, make the phone call, because even though she put out this horrendous analogy, I think the person who would have been hurt here most would probably be Gia from that. And if she's willing to like you said, take a step back and be like, Mom, this is why this was said. Pretty much you started this. You need to kind of fix it. Then they all can.
Yeah, agreed. But she doesn't want to because this is her storyline for the season. I love the producers with the flashbacks. Like I love that somewhere there's a PA that has like everybody has this cataloged in their collective memory, and they're like, wait, but so and so said this and so said that, and they pull in those cuts. I'm finding that the way Real Housewives is cut is like a lot of the drama commentary channels on YouTube, because they're talking about somebody and they're cutting in the YouTube videos of them saying that. And Real Housewives is cutting things the same way. It's like, oh, and here's you saying it. Oh, and here's you saying this. I live for it because I remember it. I'm like, didn't they? And the producers are like, why, yes, Emily, they did. Here it is.
Well, no, and I like that you're saying that. You're noticing the fact that it seems like the way that they film these shows, that they're being produced a little bit differently, and
it's evolving.
It's evolving. We were having this conversation the other day, Jason and I, because they're bringing back the Real Housewives of Miami and they're putting it on Peacock. So Jason was like, I bet you anything that they film this totally different than how they film the other Housewives that's going to be on Bravo. And I said, what do you mean? Like, how could they film it different? He said, watch, it's going to feel different to you. Just like these Netflix shows, like watching, House of Ho, that might be on HBO, but House of Ho or Bling Empire, when you watch these shows, being on a different network, it does feel different. Can I pinpoint it? No, but it feels different. We
even saw that with Life of Kylie. They tried to cut it very much like a Snapchat story, because Snapchat was kind of where Kylie was a lot, but they cut it to look like social media. To have a very Kylie feel, not a Kardashian feel. And it was very interesting to me the way that these shows are changing and how much the Housewives, I feel like the Housewives are watching how they're perceived and then shifting midstream. Like, oh, I'm being perceived this way, so next season I'm going to do this. Oh, people made comments about this, so I'm going to do this. And that is also spilling over into the now also common surgeries in between seasons and like new season, new face. Like what is even happening anymore? It's wild.
I wish we got another season of Life of Kylie. I really enjoy, I just love watching how the super rich live. And I like seeing like what their houses look like. And she has a freaking swing inside of her house with like a couch bed on. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
That light, just let us live vicariously through you. We'll watch.
I think Kylie only agreed to Life of Kylie to cock block Rob from getting a show with Rob and China.
Really?
Yep.
That's your thought process?
Mm-hmm.
See, I thought that I felt like Chris was like, I know you don't want to do this. She's like, Mom, she never wants to film Keeping Up with the Kardashians. She at this point has this money, but her mom was probably like, Kylie, let's just do it. We'll feature what you're doing as a businesswoman, talk a little bit about like your lip kits, do it as like a one-off, and boom, we're done. But I never thought about the Rob and China thing.
Rob and China were pushing and pushing and pushing, and the family didn't want Rob and China to have a show. And so it might have been Chris that went to Kylie saying, look, none of us want Rob to have to put his life out there. This is going to be a mess. If we give them you, they will back off of this.
Do you think that they already signed something with that and then Chris pulled the trigger and then they put it on Chris to figure out, okay, well, you pulled this. Now we need a show because you promised us this.
I don't know. Cause I think Rob was pushing independent of the family for his own franchise, or maybe it was China that was pushing and the family was like, no, we're not giving her a show. But I think that's the reason we saw Life of Kylie, because Rob and China were pushing and pushing and pushing for a show.
Well, China, though, too, when Rob and China, when they were filming the show, she got violent, you know, and she had moments where she freaked out. She got really upset, and she broke Kylie's TV, and she had certain moments where she gets excited and passionate. And I think the Kardashians, they play a little bit differently, where if they have those moments, they're way, way behind, you know, the closed doors. They don't necessarily share that part of their lives. And for China, she just came on a little bit too strong. I think China was actually suing the Kardashians for having that show canceled because she said that it took revenue away from her. It took food out of her baby's mouths.
I will have to go pull it up because I believe there is a Rob and China lawsuit. I'll need to pull it because I wonder if they really did use Kylie to block the Rob China project, and that's interference. I don't know what the interference with the business relationship would be if the network did it, unless there was a contract already signed. But we've strayed so far afield from Housewives, and we didn't get back to Frank, like the Catania relationship, with the fact that Frank lived with the ex-husband, lived with the boyfriend while the ex-husband was recovering from surgery. And now Dolores' son is living with David, and Dolores is living with her ex-husband. So Dolores is living with her ex-husband, and her kid is living with her boyfriend. What is happening? And why do I want them to have a spinoff? I want Dolores, Frank, David, and little Frankie to have their own series. I'm fascinated by all of them.
David would never be around to film because he would always be working. But would you ever give this woman her own spinoff? And I'm talking about Teresa, because Jackie, we're not going to watch her on her own.
It depends on how much she was going to share. If it is her journey to like finding herself and being authentic and doing that with Gia and her kids, maybe. But if she's just going to run around being an asshole to everybody, no. What I don't need is more people, like literally. What I don't need is her being like, I rather watch, I would even watch just Dolores and Frank and little Frankie. They're hilarious. I want them to have a home reno show. Like I want to watch Dolores and Frank renovate houses together. That's what I want
great at that.
Yep.
Honestly, they would be great at that. You know,
they're hilarious together. And I like Dolores was not always my favorite housewife, but she's grown on me so much because she's open. She's funny. She does let things roll off her back. She gets hot when she's really under fire, but she's also the voice of reason in all of this. She's like, Teresa's going to lose her mind. She's going to black out with anger. This is coming. But she doesn't excuse it. And she calls it out. She's like, Teresa, you're still an asshole. We know you're this way, but that's a dick thing to do.
Right.
I love Dolores.
But my gosh, again, with my mind, and I kind of lost my train of thought here no, it was so good. At first I had two things I was going to say. One, to the fact that we were talking about the Housewives and how you could change watching the show, whatever. I would be interested in watching these housewives kind of what their life would be like, not necessarily in group settings and the dramatics of all of that, but them taking meetings every day, what those meetings look like Teresa going to sign her book deal, but then also dealing with her brand partnerships and how navigating all of this and what a real day-to-day is like, instead of her just popping up all glammed out. And she's like, oh, it's a party. It's a seafood party. Oh my God, there's that stupid, right. That's not that. We need something different at this point. That's how I feel about it. But
there does need to be an evolution because it's become, and I think COVID probably made this more difficult, but it's very contrived at this point. It's like, oh, they're going to go on a trip and they're all going to drink and fight. And then somebody's going to get naked and jump in a pool and throw a tiki torch. And then they're going to travel again and they're all going to get drunk and they're going to have some food and they're going to fight. And, I think one of the most unscripted things that I've seen on Housewives, other than all of the New York nonsense that went on with the off the rails drinking, was like Vicky Gunvalson laughing so hard she peed the bed in Mexico, like those kinds of moments. But again, it's like they're taking women that are in their 40s and 50s and just treating them the same way as you would treat like a Vanderpump cast, like just travel them and ply them with alcohol and see what they do. And I'm tired of this. I'm invested in these women because we've watched them for so long, but it's like, here's a trip, here's everyone together, here's alcohol, here's conflict. It's like, okay, but there's a lot more going on in these women's lives. But now it becomes, is the show going to be about them being on the show? Because that's what their lives are like outside of the show.
Right. Well, no. And, moving forward with the Housewives, it's sometimes hard to point out what is real and what's not, but it seems like more often than not, as of lately, it's easier to point out, okay, that's manufactured, that's manufactured, that's manufactured. Yeah. But since we're getting to the end of this episode, knowing that we're going into next week with Teresa putting the bug in Joe Gorga's ear that his wife got the number from the restaurant owner and she's been texting him, how much of that do you think is true? Because Melissa said this was a tough season for her and her husband. they're not actors. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
at the end of the day, she's not an actress. She couldn't even sing for sure, but she's not an actress. And Joe Gorga's not an actor either. So do you think that was made up, or do you feel like, no, that actually happened and that was a bad lapse of judgment that happened in their relationship that just happened to play out on screen?
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. Again, I've been married long enough that you know that marriages have their ups and downs, and it's how you deal with the ups and the downs. But dealing with the downs by seeking attention elsewhere, and we do know this about Melissa Gorga, she does like attention. And if she feels like she's not getting attention, is texting some other dude the right way to do it? No. Is that going to go badly? Yes. It's something like if some guy came up to me and was like, hey, I want to give you my phone number, I'm like, you can text my husband. Like whatever you need to text with, you can text. Like I don't have friendships like that. I have colleagues and coworkers, but I've been married long enough that that's just one of those things. Also, if my husband had met somebody and gotten a phone number and was texting, I would lose my fucking mind. Like, no, we have those conversations together. So if she really got a number and was really doing that, I guess we'll see next week if she's really texting with this restaurant owner in a way that's more than like, hey, yeah, we want to set up something here, or get in touch with my husband and let's do a business deal. But if she's spending all day on a boat, like texting somebody and giggling, I can see that being a big problem for them. And if their marriage is going through problems and it happens to be caught on film, of course it's going to be a storyline, but that can be really hard to see it play back to, and to know that your kids are going to see it. And now your kids friends, parents have now all watched you go through this too. So normally that's the kind of stuff you don't know what's going on in other people's houses, and unless they share that information with you. So they do still live in a small area in New Jersey. It's people know each other.
Right. And I'm sure when Melissa found out that Teresa made that phone call, even watching back, she's probably cringing like, Teresa, I could have thrown you off of that boat for making
Oh my God. I'm very interested to see how that plays out. But you brought up the fact that Melissa wasn't a great singer. Of all of the Housewife franchises, do you have a favorite singer?
Well, it's not Melissa and it's not Kim Zolciak.
Not Luann.
It's not Luann. My gosh. And it's not Candy Burris. Oh my gosh.
Like, is Erica the best of all of the housewives that have like a singing career?
Probably the best performer, but I think for the housewives, just because she gets into it and there's like a production to it, and she's won some, what do they call it? I don't even want to minimize them, but like disco awards, and she's won some awards on her own. Yeah, maybe it's Erica. I don't know if she's technically the best singer, but she's the best performer. Candy Burris, I love the music that she writes, but then when she comes on and she does, like, sometimes she'll sing to everyone on the show, I'm like, I don't know about
right.
I don't know how great. Maybe you're more of like a songwriter. Like Lady Gaga was like, you know what? I'm going to stop writing for everybody and I'm just going to sing it myself. But because she's an amazing singer. And so did Sia. Sia's like, I'm going to stop giving all of you guys all of this. I'm going to do it myself. She's a great singer. Candy Burris, like, oh, I don't know so much.
I love so many housewives have had those singing aspirations. Do you have thoughts on kind of worst plastic surgery that we're seeing going around this season? Because I don't know what's going on with Dorit's face, but it's strange to me. Something's going on in Jersey with, oh my God, I just totally blanked on whose face I was thinking of. You've
Teresa?
seen me blank down mid-sentence. No, not Teresa's.
Her face is different though too.
Her face is different. Her face is absolutely different. Her hairline's not any different, but her face is definitely different. There's just a lot of these women were beautiful coming into Housewives, and the amount of work, my husband's like these, like particularly with Melissa Gorga, he's like, she looks significantly older than she is. And he's like, I don't know if that's makeup or lighting on the show or if it's work that's been done, because when they flashed back to her, she's a beautiful woman before she changed her whole face. And that amount of work has, I think, made her look a little bit older.
That's unfortunate. But no,
Right.
These faces have evolved. Do you remember? My gosh, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but do you remember that episode on the hills where Heidi went home to go visit her mom, and she's like, "You don't think I'm pretty?" And she's like, "Why are you talking like that?" She's like, "Because I had my throat done, and this is done, so I can only talk like this right now." And she's like, "Tell me I'm pretty," and she's like, "I can't." And her face was just like, it's like, "Oh, girl."
It just.
TV,
and I think there are people that aren't prepared, like mentally, emotionally, for what it's like seeing yourself back on film. You see it on YouTube too, though. You see YouTubers in their 20s doing work and doing Botox and doing stuff. And I'm like, our faces are meant to move, and we're meant to have expressions, and we're not all meant to look the same. But it's interesting watching yourself back on film. I even see it sometime when I edit my stuff. I'm like, oh, my eyes are uneven. My lips are uneven. And I'm like, stop it, Emily. Seriously, stop it. Stop it. But I think watching themselves back has changed, like this odd, like social media body image dysmorphia. That's not a real thing, but it feels like it is.
And if you're already a hypercritical person of yourself, then of course watching yourself. But listen, Jason and I went through, I think we were in the second or third round of interviews to do a reality show that was on Bravo. And it was right before COVID hit, and we were going through, they kept calling us back, and they were going to set up a thing where they were going to come and look at what our place looked like. And we were going through the process, and then COVID hit and they delayed everything. And Jason and I were talking about it, and we're like, do we really want to do that? He said, I feel like that would be so bad for you. Like you would kind of spiral watching yourself if you ever had a moment of weakness on TV, I would just be so like, damn it, Adam, why did you do that? And so hard on myself. He's like, I don't know if your mindset is good for being on a reality show. And I said, no, that's fair. Honestly, it's fair because everyone handles it differently. Some people watch themselves and they're like, yeah, look at me, I was great. And some people are like, oh my God, I look so fat. I hate the way I look. Look at my teeth there. Oh, nobody told me that I was tired.
Right.
Like, they're hypercritical, you know?
Everybody tells me that I'm tired, so I don't have to worry about that at all. It's interesting because this is where I think YouTube, for me, has an interesting advantage, is we get to choose very clearly what we share. Especially a lot of YouTubers still edit for themselves, and if they don't, they review it before they upload. You get to really choose what you put out there and what you don't put out there, and you get to choose how you put it out there. I get to choose my lighting, and I get to choose my camera angle, so you see this and not necessarily all of this. Like, we get to choose different. Stop it. I see you messing with your chin. We get to choose how we show up. And when you're filmed, they have the cameras, they have the production control, they edit the conversations. It's a very different thing, and it's interesting to me. My husband got approached to interview for Survivor, and did a few rounds for Survivor. And then they wanted him to film over the same summer we would have been getting married. And we talked and talked and talked. I'm like, I don't want to delay our marriage, because I was getting ready to start law school. I'm like, I don't want to delay us getting married like 4 years till I finish law school. And it was interesting having those conversations about what would this be like if you were going to go and be on Survivor, which was one of our favorite shows. It was very interesting.
My God, I would never. I would be terrified. That or like Naked.
I would never.
Afraid. There's no.
Never. I would never.
Never. Okay.
I'm not made for reality TV show. We got approached about our wedding too, about a show that they were filming about weddings, and I think it was through the Survivor people. They're like, oh, you're getting married during the same period of time, and my family was like, what we don't want is this whole thing to be filmed, and after going through the stress of a wedding, it probably was for the best.
Was it a wild time?
It was fun. I mean, I was 24. We were young. I was the first in my group of friends to get married. There was lots of drinking. We'll definitely tell those. We'll spill that tea another time. But it was interesting. It was probably for the best to not have it all on TV. Throwing a wedding can be stressful.
Yeah.
So.
And that's the thing too. Is like sometimes when I jump off here, everyone always says to me, they're like, not everyone, like I'm talking about like the whole world watches, but
the whole world does watch,
right?
And needs to subscribe and needs to throw a thumbs up, because we love Adam. Law nerds, if you aren't subscribed and thumbs up, please.
Hey,
I know you want to
love it.
Get it. But when you get off, when you are not live, go. I totally interrupted.
No. You know, when I'm not live, sometimes I get messages and people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're always so happy and in the best, most positive mood." And if I jump off here and you go ask Jason that, Jason's like, oh my God, he's an asshole. Or like
I'm sure he doesn't say that.
He doesn't say that, but you know, like sometimes I get off here and I'm like, hey, and then when I go in the room, Jason will be like, okay, do you want to go do something? And I'm like, no, I'm tired. And he's like, why do you give all of your energy to YouTube? And then you jump off here and you turn into this, like, I'm done. I'm very, like, I talk kind of like monotone. I talk like this. I'm very relaxed. And then when I come off here, even when we do like, right in 15 minutes, him and I are going to do a Salt Lake City recap. We'll sit next to each other and I'll be like, hey guys, this and that. And then as soon as we stop broadcasting, he's like, okay, I don't need your YouTube voice in my ear for an hour. I'm like,
I love YouTube voice. I love YouTube voice. That's so funny. I am, when I talk about things I'm excited about, this is how I am when I talk about things that I'm excited about, but I'm also ADHD. So when people like are talking to me about things I'm not interested in, you can see my face just stop. You can like see me stop watching. I'm like, or listening. I'm like, but we get to choose what we talk about. So you get to talk about things you're excited about. I'm sure if you hated an episode, you could come on and be like, you guys, this episode is not it.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
It's not it.
I mean, you're right. I'm kind of like you in the sense that I kind of pan over too. If I'm not interested, I'm like, and again, I'm going to one day regret always using my relationship as an example, but sometimes we'll be having a conversation and Jason's like, what did I just say? And I'm like, I totally glazed out. And he's like, see, that's the problem. You give
this happens in all relationships.
Yeah, you have to, like, you have to listen. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. And I don't even catch myself. Like, I'm like, shit, why did I do that?
You know, Jason, you need to talk faster.
Yeah.
Like, I need you to tell me the point first and then give me the information after it. And then I'm hooked.
YouTube voice on. Start projecting at me.
Get your YouTube voice on.
Yeah, start yelling at me.
Did you have a favorite moment, as I know you need to wrap up because you have a recap. Did you have a favorite moment from this episode?
Yes. And it was probably the fact that Margaret was so relentless in her, you need to fix this, and kind of just giving it to her straight, because it does sort of, in a way, not totally, but sort of in a way go against what Kim D said, being the fact that nobody will go against Teresa. And I feel like while Margaret didn't go against Teresa, Margaret is still giving it straight to Teresa, which, as we've seen over 11 seasons, she's not always been able to take on the truth or facts without having a hothead or a big reaction to it. And to this, I mean, sure, she's kind of dancing around in circles and she's not accepting responsibility, but she's also not blowing up on Margaret. So,
she's deflecting like a mirror. Being called out. She's just deflecting, but she's not fighting back because she knows they're right. She just doesn't give a shit.
See, and I love, by the way, I don't know if you caught Jennifer Aiden's comment about Melissa. She's like, what would she have greeted me if I was a mirror when she walked in? I was like, I know you thought about that, but it was good and it was worth it. Thank you for sharing that, because I like it.
It was a moment. Jennifer is really fighting for her place at the table. I'm very interested. Jennifer's sharing her family dynamic, I think, is really interesting. And I'm hoping that Jennifer continues to share her family dynamic with a more traditional family, her parents from an arranged marriage. One of her brothers got married and moved abroad. Her other brother is gay. Watching her family navigate that, watching her kids be okay with it, watching her mother struggle with it. It's very, very interesting to me. And I hope we see more from her. And her, out of all the wives, I think her plastic surgery looks the best, which says a lot for her husband.
Okay. All right. I like that. But I was also kind of, and you know, again, I thought it was comical watching this episode when she's talking to her mom and she's like, you know, what do you think of baby John? And she's like, oh, I love Brian. And she's like, Mom, you can't just rename the kid. And then the mom got emotional, and she, obviously, because her and her husband,
are struggling.
They're struggling. They have a history. But what? If I name my kid Derek after my dad being Derek, and my mom's like, I hate your dad, and then all of a sudden she comes over and she starts babysitting my son Derek, and she's like, oh, little Johnny, I'd be like, get out.
You're like, what are you doing?
My kid. What are you doing? Yeah. But all right. So with that being said, wow, an hour really flew by fast. I thought this was so much fun. I love talking Housewives, and I feel like you and I could just go back and forth because we kind of go off of the topic, but still stay on the reality TV topic. But there's so many great comparisons that I feel like you and I are right here with. So
we're right. Could talk Housewives forever. I love it so much. So thank you
for
letting me come on and share the space and talk Housewives and just kind of have fun. This season is going to be interesting.
It's going to be, to say the least. Next episode is going to be very telling on how the rest of the season is going to go too, especially if Melissa and her husband, Joe, are actually having problems. So hopefully, I mean, if you're around next week and we say you might have a free time slot and we can steal you, we don't even have to keep all of your time for an hour. Maybe we can only steal you for 30 because I know you're busy too.
The law nerds know that I will never wrap anything up in under an hour. It's just, there's so much to be said. There's so much to talk about. Like, we had great stuff in this episode that wasn't just Teresa stuff, and I love it.
Yeah, no, and that's awesome because I'm the same way. I could sit here and talk for forever. And sometimes I've had guests literally, who I'm not going to say their names because I still sometimes do collabs with them, but they'll come on and before we start, they're like, keep it to 20, man. Like, don't take calls. I'm not really in the mood for it. And I'm like, so it stresses me out so much when I'm doing the live and the collab because I'm like, I'm so fixated on the 20 minutes and not wasting your time.
Right.
More than I am actually having a real conversation that people are actually going to enjoy. It's at that point, sometimes you're like, should I just do this by myself? Because I'm not giving myself a time constraint. But no,
I appreciate you being mindful and respectful of time. But yes, we will have to chat more about Housewives. Hopefully your audience doesn't mind me stealing a little bit of the conversation with you, because I know they're used to getting you just breaking it down and we wander a bit. But I think we covered this episode pretty fairly.
I think we did too. I feel like we covered at least what was the most important aspects, especially Dolores' relationship, the ridiculousness of Teresa and Jackie's situation, the fact that Gia is so grown up, Margaret really stepping in, Jennifer Aydin's family, Melissa Gorga, you're pretty much saying that she could, in the next 5 years, be featured on an episode of Botched, which we'll have to wait and see. And aside from that,
I don't think I said that. Did I say that?
No,
I mean,
you didn't say that.
I feel like she's aged herself a bit with the work, but I also think a lot of, again, these women are beautiful on their own, and then they start to morph into looking like one another. It's like, it's the reason that Kris Jenner looks like Michael Jackson. Like, it's just too much work done at some point. And I have no shade to plastic surgery. I think at some point, though, the watching yourself back and being like, I should change this, I should change that, becomes problematic for people. And I feel like maybe sometimes before the next surgery, maybe that money is better spent on some therapy.
Yeah. Or a hypnotherapist.
They could make that a show too. I mean, I bet the show would pay for your therapy if you would be willing to do it on the show.
Bravo actually does offer in the contracts with all Bravo celebrities, everybody from every single franchise. It's a part of their contracts. This is a known fact. Well, maybe it's not known if you don't
Not
know.
known to me. I don't look, I watch the shows. I don't dive into the stuff that goes on in between and the stuff that goes on with the Housewives on social, because I'm busy trying to follow all the lawsuits. So I watch the episodes, but the behind the scenes stuff, I don't know. So tell me.
Yeah,
and no, you have another show.
No, they provide them with therapy. So
good.
I learned this from being around VPR for so long, but as castmates, you are provided therapy for being a part of the show, because sometimes the show makes you have these tough conversations where you have to address your marital issues or your relationships or why you're drinking the way you're drinking. And since they're getting that out of you, they don't want you to just address it and then throw yourself off of a cliff. So they're like, we will provide therapy for you.
I think that's a very healthy thing that everyone should take them up on. I really do think that, and again, watching yourself back and examining yourself in the public eye and then watching other people examine you in the public eye is kind of a trip. And I can understand them being like, well, these people on Twitter think this. It's like, right, but they're basing that off of a clip of a thing. Like it's not really you. And it's a whole different conversation about how people portray themselves in the media and how they really are and how those things get complicated. But
and people see, again, we could do this for hours, but and people too, sometimes people get like, I don't want to say like they're a little off, but sometimes people see these housewives or Bravo celebrities or just real like celebrities, whoever, influencers, and they feel like they know them. So they want to touch you. They want to grab you. They feel, we watch what's going on in your home. Like,
yes.
I think it was maybe even you who said it. Maybe
we talked about it, the parasocial relationships.
Yeah. And keeping up with the Kardashians, like we know more about them than we probably know about our own family. So then when we see them, we're like, when I saw Kim at the Ellen show, I was like, oh my God, hey, like it's been a while. Like the season was
Yeah.
off. I'm like, you look great. And I'm like, I don't know you, but I didn't have a conversation. I'm just thinking in my head, like,
Yeah, no, it creates that forced closeness with them. And again, I talked about it. We've seen them wax each other. We've seen Scott Disick go through alcohol and parents dying and rehab. Like we've seen all of this. And I think the Kardashians are one of the shows that talk the most about what it's like being on the show and then seeing the reaction to being on the show. They touch on that because it's their show and they can do what they want. Bravo doesn't touch on it as much, but they're starting to. You're starting to be like, why would you say that while we're filming? We learned Bravo, Bravo, Bravo. We saw producers come in Beverly Hills being like, no, you're on a reality show, Denise. What are you doing? You don't just get to be like, cut. Next scene, please. So
she's like, I'm Denise.
We're seeing it.
Richards. Yes, I do.
We're seeing it more, but it's an interesting time. So go talk about Salt Lake. Thank you for having me. Law Nerds, if you're here, like, subscribe, do the YouTube things.
Hey, thank you for that. And no, of course, I'll send you a message. And hopefully, if you're around next week, I would love to talk about this Melissa Gorga, Joey Gorga drama as it goes down to see what your reaction is to the next episode. And again, guys, if you haven't already, I'm sure you have, most of you in here, go follow Emily Baker at Emily D. Baker, the Emily D. Baker. So
the Emily D. Baker.
Yeah, go check out all of Emily's stuff. I mean, honestly, I'm so fascinated with watching your stuff. And I love the fact that you even always put on your Instagram stories, like where people are watching you and they're doing all these other little random things. It makes you wonder what people are actually doing as they're watching these. But
I love it.
It has to be rewarding just knowing that there's so many people who love watching you and that they just sit there and they take that whole ride for an hour, 2 hours, whatever the time is with you. So for that,
I have so many creatives in my audience, and I love seeing that people are in law school working on stuff. They're working on motions because they're also working lawyers. They're crocheting, they're knitting, they're painting. I love seeing what people are creating. And then the animals, people share their paw nerds with me and I live for it. It's like, oh, my dog is going nuts at the TV because you have a cat filter on, or, oh, my cats are sitting here watching you talk. I love it so much. So it's a lot of fun seeing where people find our content, right? That's one of the fun things about being on this platform.
Yeah, I mean, I probably don't want to see what everybody's doing behind the scenes because sometimes that could get a little weird. But
you're younger and much more attractive than I am. I'm sure that's much more of a concern.
No.
We've taken it a whole different direction. He's like, I wasn't even thinking that.
Okay, well, with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and cut this now. Again, make sure you go give Emily a follow at the Emily D. Baker. Give this video a like if you liked it. We appreciate it. It helps a lot. I guess that's what you say. And thank you so much. Please subscribe if you haven't. I will see you guys in 3 minutes. Bye, guys.